good evening to all of you. So today we are again here to continue with our English lectures on the organon of medicine. So till last lecture we have already covered till aphorism 75. Like we were talking the last time that from aphorism 70 onwards, it will be more of a practical part. So in the practical part, we are now going through the understanding of what are acute diseases and what are the chronic diseases. This understanding is very important. When a patient comes to us in the clinic, many times we are, there is some little bit of this thing that whether to treat this case acutely or chronically. Like few days back, there was this message from one of my students that his father-in-law, he had some kind of pain in the abdomen, and there was some this gallstone, the cholelithiasis, it was diagnosed. And his question was, the first thing was that how should we approach, like should I give an acute for the state, or should I give the constitutional medicine? Okay, so it is very important for us to understand whether which diseases are to be considered as the acute diseases and which are to be considered as the chronic diseases, because our approach on what we have to prescribe or how we have to go through the case, it basically depends upon first our understanding of this thing, that whether the disease in front of us, whether it is an acute disease or a chronic disease. Okay, in acute disease, what kind of acute disease? In chronic disease, what kind of chronic disease? So that further differentiations will go as we move further with the organon. So in the aphorism 7, we have done till 75. So in aphorism 73, 74, 75, more 74 and 75, we have gone through the class of chronic diseases, which is happening due to the medications, the allopathic medications which are being given. So we will be continuing with the same thing in the next few aphorisms, where Dr. Hahnemann will give us more insight into why and how he is treating this class as not the natural chronic diseases, the class of natural chronic diseases, why he is describing this class as artificial chronic diseases, and how we have to approach these things. So, but those devastations and maimings of human organism, exteriorly and interiorly, affected by years frequently of the unsparing exercise of a false art with its hurtful drugs and treatment, must be remedied by the vital force itself. So Dr. Hahnemann is trying to tell us here that all the diseases which are occurring naturally, okay, we can treat those diseases, we can give relief to all those diseases by the means of, but all those destructions, all those symptoms, all those hurtful things which are done in the exterior or in the interior of the patient, and it is being done from many years, which is done frequently by the hurtful drugs and the treatment, they must be remedied by the vital force itself. Only vital force can remedy itself to these maimings. There is no, we'll go further and see. Appropriate aid being given for the eradication of any chronic miasm that may happen to be lurking in the background. Although we have to give the medicine in those cases also, we know that even if some other medicines are given, some allopathic medicine, some antipathic medicines are given, that means there had been some natural symptoms. There has been some symptoms of the natural disease. But we have to give the medicine so that we can eradicate that chronic miasm which is lurking behind, lurking in the background, which is producing the natural disease. But once it is done with the homeopathic medicine, the rest of the symptoms, the rest of the things which are produced by the hurtful drugs, by these medicines, they have to be remedied by the vital force itself, if it has not already been too much weakened by such mischievous acts, and can devote several years to this huge operation undisturbed. So many times when we are asked that how long it is going to take, the homeopathic remedy when it is given, because I have seen such cases also where not much of bungling of the medicines was done, and when a right remedy was given, the effect of the medicine or the result of the medicine was too quick, very easily it restored the health in the patients. But then there are these kind of diseases. There are some patients who come to us who have been taking such kind of medicines or very strong medications for some diseases from a long time. So the symptoms which these these medicines have produced on the body, they can only be remedied by the vital force itself. And it can take several years to this huge operation undisturbed. Without getting disturbed, if we don't disturb it, it can take many years to reverse all the processes which have been done on it. A human healing art for the restoration to the normal state of those innumerable abnormal conditions so often produced by the allopathic non-healing art, there is not and cannot be. So all those conditions, all those abnormal conditions, all those diseases or disease symptoms which are produced by the medication, such medications, Dr. Hahnemann is saying that there is no art, no human healing art which is there, which can restore these conditions to the normalcy. There is not and cannot be. So in such cases with our homeopathic medicines, we can remove whatever was naturally there. What the symptoms which are produced by, for example, if someone is taking some medication from 10 years, 15 years, and there are some symptoms which has come up because of those medications. Those have to be remedied by the vital force once we have removed the natural disease from the body. And it can take many years for this huge operation. Footnote to Aphorism 76. If the patient at length comes, the practitioner of such a treatment is in the habit of pointing out to sorrowing relatives at the post-mortem examination these internal organic disfigurements which are due to his suit, but which he artfully maintains to be the original incurable disease. So there is this one article, one essay of Dr. Hahnemann, which he wrote about this particular thing which he observed, and it is translated in his lesser writings. If you want to study, you can go. Then there is this: be aware of the allopathy sick man, like this. This is the name of the beware of the allopathy, the sick man. Like he's telling the sick man to be aware of what kind of medications he or she is taking. Dr. Hahnemann is saying that when after such a treatment, the treatment is going on and the patient at length comes, the patient dies after such kind of treatment. So the practitioner, the physician who was giving this medicine or this kind of treatment, he basically does a post-mortem and shows all those things which are disfigured inside, which are deteriorated inside, the lung which is disfigured, the liver which is disfigured, there is some degeneration of the kidneys, there is some ulcers in the intestines. So Dr. Hahnemann is saying, and I think he is being very daring. This is a very courageous or daring statement which he has given, that all these organic disfigurements which are produced are due to his pseudo art, because means that all these disfigurements, they are basically due to the medications which are being given, but he artfully maintains this to be the original incurable disease. He says very artfully, he tries to convince the relatives that this was the disease. So those deceitful records, again a very big word, that those records of the pathological which are given in the pathology, Dr. Hahnemann saying that those deceitful records, the illustrated works on pathological anatomy, exhibit the products of such lamentable bungling. Diseased people from country, those from the poor of cities who have died without such bungling, with hurtful measures, are not opened up through pathological anatomy as a rule. He's saying that all those people from the country, from the villages, or who are from a poor background, who could not afford such kind of treatment, he said that these kind of bunglings are not seen in their this thing. Such corruption and deformities would not be found in their corpses. From this fact can be judged the value of the evidence drawn from these beautiful illustrations, as well as of the honesty of these authors and bookmakers. So this footnote to aphorism 76. If you go through the history of Dr. Hahnemann, like when we read about these things, when we read in the lesser writings, many times Dr. Hahnemann used very harshful words, very harshful. When we read it, we say that okay, he has gone over the board, and in speaking or saying some things. But if you go through the history of Dr. Hahnemann, the way in the first he tried to approach the physicians, telling them about homeopathy and what it can basically, the beautiful results which it can give, or the cures which it can form. He was basically displaced from so many cities so many times because of his this approach. From many cities he was told to kind of get out, like you are not needed here. As many people, he called him a scoundrel, he called him that he's a corrupt person, or that he's coming up with this kind of theory. He's telling that these things are being done wrong with the medical system. So all these years of things which were going on with him, although he was telling truth, because when we see it logically, when we see in our experience, we see all these things happening. We all see these things happening with our patients when they are coming to us. But then he was a man who was suffering from this kind of thing from so many years. He was taking, he was the only person who was kind of standing against whatever was against the society, the things which were going against the society, the treatments which are hurtful. He was the only person who was openly saying that you are doing more hurt than any benefit. But still he was questioned all the time. He was, the whole organon was questioned, and the whole method of the treatment was questioned. Everything was questioned. So many times in the aphorisms, many times in the his letters, his articles, we see this kind of a defiance coming up. Very bold statements, although they are true, but the way he tells them in an open defiance, from there we can understand that, because when we started with the organon, and the first thing which I told you, that it is very important to, if we want to understand the organon in a whole manner, that we need to understand the emotions of Dr. Hahnemann. He was trying to do something good. He did something good. With all his efforts, with all his careful experiments, when we will go to the miasms, he will tell that I have devoted 13 years to these experiments before I came up with you, with these things in front of you, because he knew that how accurately, how carefully he is doing even small of the things, even while preparing some kind of medicine. If we go through the materia medica pura, the methods which he has, how to prepare the medicines, very minute details he has given. He was only able to give so minute details because he have done so many experiments. Then out of all those experiments, he found which is the best one. So His life was completely a devoted life to save the humanity or to give something to the suffering humanity, some kind of system which can heal them, which can cure them. So when he saw these things happening, when he saw all these things going on around him, sometimes he goes into that state of defiance, very bold statements where he's challenging the pathological books in a way that all these beautiful illustrations, all these things which are shown that this is cirrhosis of liver, this is this, this is that, this is that, that they are basically the bunglings which are done inside the human being. Now we'll take an example. How this thing is basically presented to us and how it actually is. Because we all are coming from the medical background. We have all read all these things. We have read pathologies, we have read histopathologies, we have gone all those things. But if we just sit back and think about it, just think about it. For example, there is some kind of unrelenting stress going on in the life of some person. So because of this unrelenting stress, the blood glucose is going to increase. The more the stress, the more the blood glucose will increase. And we call it the diabetes mellitus. And some kind of medicine is given to control that blood glucose, some metformin, some glimepiride, or some insulin. So now when this medicine is given, so the body also has to react. The secondary action has to come to the primary action. So the body reacts usually to these kind of medicines with peripheral resistance of glucose. For example, if the hands were taking around 200 moles of glucose, they basically develop, because the with glimepiride, with metformin or insulin, the blood glucose is decreased, but the body needs a sufficient amount of that thing. It needs, because of stress. Now stress is not gone. We were under stress, the body produced more glucose so that we can work more, we can think more, we can come out of that stress. But we considered it diabetes mellitus, we considered it something very dangerous, and we started taking metformin or glimepiride. So the body goes into the secondary defense mechanism, where it has to collect the glucose from the periphery so that it can give it to the brain, it can give it to the most important parts. So from there the body reacts in a peripheral resistance of the glucose. The peripheries, our hands, our legs, our feet, they basically uptake less of glucose. So from there some kind of symptom they start. For example, the first symptoms usually which start after these kind of medicines are the neuropathies, numbness, some loss of sensation. These kind of symptoms they start coming up. Then they can go to the retinopathy, nephropathy, gangrene, because the peripheral resistance to the glucose is, but it is being created by the body so that the glucose can be given to the brain so that it can fight against that stress. It can go fight against that survival thing which it is going through. But all these neuropathies, all these retinopathies, all these nephropathies or the gangrene, they are basically ascribed to the diabetes. We say that it is because of the diabetes mellitus. Because the blood glucose was high, so the neuropathy, gangrene, retinopathy, nephropathy, they happened. So this is how the complications to some kind of diseases which are given in our books, they are usually due to the you will see so many people who didn't even know that they had diabetes. They were going through their life very well. They never checked it, they never did any this thing, and they never had these kind of symptoms. I know so many patients, I know so many people in my life who didn't take these kind of medicines for the glucose or diabetes. They exercise, they kind of did something to control or maintain at whatever level it was, and they never suffered from these kind of symptoms. My own grandfather, he had very high diabetes, but he was also a homeopath. So he never took any of these medications for anything, and he never had any symptoms. So from when we see these things and when we compare that what have come in my experience, many times the patients come to us, they found diabetes accidentally, like someday they just went and the blood sugar fasting was around 200 to 30 to 20. I have some patients who came because they were already taking medicine, so they came to me that suddenly it has come like this, or they knew some of the relatives taking, so they didn't prefer to take any other medicine, so they came to me, but they didn't had any kind of these symptoms. Even many patients I know who are having this diabetes from 8, 8, 9 years, who are not taking any of these medications, this metformin or insulin or this thing, no symptoms, nothing at all. On the contrary, I have seen many patients who are taking the medications and then they start going through these kind of, very prominently we will see one symptom, weakness of memory. Very common. We don't talk about it because we don't relate it with diabetes, but it is a very common symptom in the patient who are taking metformin or who are taking insulin. They start forgetting things because glucose is needed to for our day-to-day functions. The real cure will be that the body should stop feeling that stress, or, or the bad effects of the stress on the body, they should stop. That will be the good line of cure, the good line of treatment which we can do. And this is not with this thing, this is with the, and usually you will see that after you have given the medicine, the diabetes, it starts coming down, and at a certain point it comes and stops. Like for example, fasting 180, 190, 200, and it stops. It does not go down, it does not decrease from there, although they are taking metformin or anything, but it will become because now the body is not able to decrease it further. When we are giving metformin, when we are giving insulin, we are trying to basically alter the this gluconeogenesis with that thing. So the whole biomechanism of gluconeogenesis is disturbed with these medicines. And once it is disturbed, once it is compromised, it can um, be brought near to normal. The Aphorism 76 tells us. But the rest of the healing has to be done by the vital force, and it can take many years, or it can just remain at that without giving any kind of trouble. So whenever we are giving the medications, when we are giving the taking a case, we have to take care of these things also. That okay, these kind of medicines are going from this long time. So I should expect that there will be some symptoms. There may be some symptoms. If the vitality is not too low, that some symptoms which are produced by these kind of medicines, they will remain even though the rest of the disease is basically cured by the homeopathic medicine. And we need to guide the patients also that see these symptoms or this part of the disease, it will go very slowly. So you have to be very patient. So aphorism 77, those diseases are inappropriately named chronic, which persons incur who expose themselves continually to avoidable noxious influences, who are in habit of indulging in injurious liquors or ailments. Sorry, here the ailments will come. So then the next part of the chronic diseases, which are inappropriately named chronic. What is this? Which are inappropriately named chronic, which persons incur who expose themselves continually to avoidable noxious influences. Some kind of noxious influences, some kind of things which we are doing, we are taking in our diet, in our regimen. There are some kind of habits which basically produce some kind of diseases or some kind of symptoms which are inappropriately named chronic. Why they are inappropriately named chronic? Because they are basically coming out of our habits. Who are in the habit of indulging in injurious liquors. Some people who are having liquors or injurious things to eat or to drink, there are some symptoms which can come after that. So those things are not true chronic diseases. They are again those chronic diseases which are basically occurring because of these habits or these kind of the things which are being taken. Are addicted to dissipations of many kind which undermine the health, which who undergo prolonged abstinence from the things that are necessary for the support of life, who reside in unhealthy localities, especially marshy districts. So all those symptoms, for example, if someone is not taking something in the diet, many times nowadays, some teenagers, they diet a lot. They have this, tendency to keep themselves hungry. So if some weakness is coming, if some vertigo is coming, if some part of the body is not working, there is some trembling. Okay, if the body is going into a state of anemia because of these kind of habits, so they are not the chronic diseases. They can be altered. These symptoms can be altered if we take proper diet or if we exclude some things from our diet. For example, some injurious liquors, some injurious substances which are being taken. If they are removed from the diet, the body will start coming back to the health. Who reside in unhealthy localities, some people who are living in such kind of localities which are unhealthy, like there is a lot of water accumulation there, mosquitoes are there, some flies are there, some marshy districts are there, there is a lot of humidity there, who are housed in cellars or other confined dwellings which are deprived of exercise or of open air, who ruin their health by overexertion of body or mind, or we are into a job or in a habit or in a profession where we are overexerting ourselves, we are in some kind of anxiety about future, like we have had a case in Thailand of a man who was overworked. He started getting confused, the mind started getting confused and confounding, and the loss of memory and the weakness in the body because of overworking. He was in a state of overworked state. So when we are overworking, overexerting ourselves, because rest is a very needful part of our life, for our mind also, for our body also. If we are not giving it rest, it cannot function to its proper standards. So rest is very much important. But if we are not giving rest to the body, if we are not giving rest to the mind, and we are continuously doing something, and that can also produce a state in the body which can appear to be diseased, but it is not a chronic diseased state. These states of ill health which persons bring upon themselves disappear spontaneously provided no chronic miasm lurks in the body under an improved mode of living, and they cannot be called chronic diseases. So whenever these states are removed, the state of ill health, they also disappear and the health starts coming, until and unless there is some chronic miasm behind it, because many times this can happen due to a chronic miasm also. Plus these kind of conditions, they aggravate the situation. But when there is no chronic miasm, where there is no natural disease, but all the disease state or all the symptoms are due to these kind of habits or this kind of routine, some indolent routine, some kind of overworked routine, then when you remove that kind of routine, when you guide the patient that do these things in the life or don't do these things in the life, the healthy state, it will start coming back. So these are also not, cannot be called as the chronic diseases. So all these diseases are not natural true chronic diseases. So now we are coming to the true natural chronic diseases. What are those? The true natural chronic diseases are those that arise from a chronic miasm, which when left to themselves and unchecked by the employment of those remedies that are specific for them, always go on increasing and growing worse, notwithstanding the best mental and corporeal regimen. So the true chronic diseases basically arise from chronic miasms. What is a chronic miasm? We have to understand that all the procedures, all the processes which are going on, they have a start, they have a middle, and then they have an end. That is what we call as a process. There is something preceding that event, then there is something which is succeeding that event. So it is going on in a flow. So the chronic miasm is that process which basically produces disease in the patient, which makes the organism diseased. When we are saying that make the organism diseased, we are not going for any particular name. It can be any disease, any disease. But the whole process, how it is going on, that is what is called as the chronic miasm. Either it is SORA, either it is psychosis, either it is syphilis. There was a starting point, then it started going on, and with succeeding events, it keep on going on and on, which when left to themselves, if you don't do anything to them, if you don't take care of this chronic miasm or the chronic diseases, you don't give any kind of medication, and unchecked by employment of those remedies that are specific for them, if means if some homeopathic remedy is not given to them, they will always keep on growing and increasing and growing worse. This is a very true image of what we see in reality. Whenever the patient comes to us, we start asking the question when the disease started, how it progressed, how it is going now. We always see that from the beginning to this point of time when the patient is with us, the disease has always increased. It has always increased. It may have gone to some kind of latent stages in between, but whenever it came back more intensely. It came back with more new symptoms. It came back with more violent symptoms. And this is in every disease. This is with every patient. I give a very this example which most of the people can correlate with is that from the time you have started becoming sick, whether your medication has increased or decreased. If it has increased either in the number of medication, in the strength of the salts, or the strength of the dose, like from 25 it went to 50, then to 100, any kind. For example, you were taking one salt for BP and then two salts were given and now three salts are given. Anyway, if you see it, if the medication is increasing, that means the disease has increased. It has not decreased. Because if the disease would have decreased, then there would be no need to give more medicines. There would be no need to increase the medicines if the disease has decreased. So that is a natural character of a chronic disease, that it will keep on increasing. It will keep on growing worse. Notwithstanding the best mental and corporeal regimen, even if we take best of the diet, even if we take best of the exercise, we keep best of the routine, best of the discipline, even then it will keep on increasing and torment the patient to the end of his life with ever aggravated sufferings. And until the end of the life of the patient, it will keep, the sufferings will aggravate, it will keep tormenting the patient, it will keep making him sick in different ways. These are the most numerous and greatest scourges of the human race. So these chronic diseases, they are the biggest problem. They are the biggest upset, and they are so numerous. For the most robust constitution, the best regulated mode of living, and the vigorous energy, most vigorous energy of the vital force are insufficient for their eradication. Even if we have the robust constitution, very strong constitution, physically, mentally, we have a best regulated mode of living. We are eating properly, exercising properly, taking care of everything, and the vital force is also very vigorous in energy. Even then, they are insufficient for their cure, for their eradication. It cannot be done. It cannot be done without a proper medicine, without an intelligent physician. It cannot be done. Because that is the character of true chronic diseases. That once they start, once that chronic process starts from the chronic miasm, it keeps on increasing and increasing and increasing. It is as if something is constantly being poured into something. There is a constant influx of a bad energy, of something which is, disease producing energy. There is a constant influx. It is coming, coming, coming. It's not stopping at all. Until and unless some right medicine is given, until and unless some homeopathic medicine is given to the patient, only then this influx stops and the rest of the disease can be eradicated. Otherwise, we just take care of few symptoms and this influx is going on. It is producing some new symptoms here and there in the body. This is what is happening. Aphorism 79. Hitherto, syphilis alone has been to some extent known as such a chronic miasmatic disease. So first he is telling about syphilis, that syphilis is basically such a chronic miasmatic disease which, when uncured, ceases only with the termination of life. If this syphilis is not cured properly, it will end in the termination of the life of the patient. Psychosis, the condylomatous disease, the disease which originates from the gonorrhea, equally ineradicable by the vital force without proper medicinal treatment, was not recognized as a chronic miasmatic disease of a peculiar character, which it nevertheless undoubtedly is. So he's saying that psychosis was never recognized, or even the syphilis was never recognized as the miasmatic diseases. But they are undoubtedly, because once psychosis starts, I will talk more detail about the three miasms in the next, starting of the next lecture. I will make some slides, I will make some charts to, we will discuss about it. I'm just going through these two aphorisms, what Dr. Henneman has given to us, and in the next class I will tell you what we understand from it. Okay, so we will do it into these parts. Maybe the next class will be completely on miasms, because it is very important to understand the miasm before we move forward in the organ. That what is basically miasm, because the homeopath, as homeopaths we talk, okay, that there is a sora, there is a psychosis, and there is a syphilis. But what are they? And why there are three of them? Why not four? Why not two? Why not one? Why not six? Because there are many people who have given 7 miasms, who have given 12 miasms. It is not like that. It is not like that. We have to understand why there are only 3 miasms: the sora, psychosis, and syphilis, and why only these are there. Only these are to be called as the miasms. We will go through those things in the next thing. We'll complete the aphorism 79 and aphorism 80. Understand what is written, and then we will go forward from there. And physicians imagined they had, because at that time the treatment of syphilis and psychosis, it was a more local treatment. For the gonorrheal warts or the gonorrhea, some local treatment was given. For syphilis, local mercury was used. So when it was gone from there, the physician thought that the syphilis or psychosis is cured. When they had destroyed the growths upon the skin, okay, So they imagined they had cured it when they had destroyed the growths upon the skin. But the persisting dyscrasia occasioned by it escaped their observations. But the other symptoms which started after these things disappeared, the physician could not see that because he thought that the gonorrhea is a local disease. He thought that this syphilis is a local disease. But these diseases have their own kind of processes, disease processes, which are different from others. So we will be discussing about those disease processes. Aphorism 80. Incalculably greater and more important than the two chronic miasms just named, means syphilis and psychosis. However, is the chronic miasm of Sora, which whilst those two reveal their specific internal dyscrasia, the one by the venereal chancre and the other by the cauliflower-like growths, does also, after the completion of the internal infection of the whole organism, announced by a peculiar cutaneous eruption, sometimes consisting only of a few vesicles, accompanied by intolerable voluptuous tickling, itching, and a peculiar odor, the monstrous internal chronic miasm, the Sora, the only real fundamental cause and producer of all the other numerous, I may say innumerable forms of diseases. Sorry. So incalculably greater and more important. He's saying that, okay, I have told you about the syphilis and psychosis, that they have these kind of eruptions on the genitals, and they have some kind of internal dyscrasia, internal disease processes, internal symptoms which start after these eruptions or these things come up on the skin. But even much greater than these two miasms is the chronic miasm of Sora. He's saying that basically, like the syphilis shows itself via venereal chancre, a kind of ulcer, which is shown on the genitals, or the psychosis shows it's by the cauliflower-like warts or growths on the genitals. This Sora, it also announces itself when it has completed the internal infection. Now, it is a very important thing to know, understand. After the completion of the internal infection, so even the first symptom of the Sura, the eruption, the vesicles or the itch, it comes after it has infected the organism internally. So the infection comes first. And like I told you, that whenever we are talking about the infection in Organon or homeopathy, it is not that kind of infection. It is not the bacteria getting transferred or the virus getting transferred. It is a dynamic infection. Dynamic infection from already infected source. And there is a hint in the coming footnote that how this dynamic infection basically involves this dissipation of the sura or the this thing. Announced by a peculiar cutaneous eruption, it announces itself that I have come and I am here. I have infected this organism by some few vesicles accompanied by intolerable voluptuous tickling, itching, and a peculiar odor. So when it starts, it shows these kind of symptoms. Now it can show many other varied symptoms. We'll go to that part later on. The monstrous internal chronic miasm, the Sora, the only real fundamental cause. It is the only real fundamental cause. Even the rest of the two miasms, the syphilis and the psychosis, they are basically dependent upon this, the Sora. It is the only real fundamental cause and producer of all the other numerous, and I may say innumerable, uncountable forms of the diseases, which under the names, although we have given all those diseases names, we have given the name of nervous debility, some hysteria, hypochondrosis, mania, melancholia, imbecility, madness, epilepsy and convulsions of all sorts, softening of the bones, rachitis, scoliosis, and kyphosis, carries cancer, fungus, even the cancer comes under the SORA. Fungus, hematodes, neoplasms, gout, hemorrhoids, jaundice, cyanosis, dropsy, amenorrhea, hemorrhage from the stomach, nose, lungs, bladder, and womb, of asthma and ulceration of the lungs, of impotence and barrenness, of megrim, deafness, cataract, hemorrhages, urinary calculus, paralysis, defects of the senses, and pains of thousands of kinds, etc. Figure in systematic works as pathology as peculiar independent diseases. So it is the only time when Dr. Hahnemann gives so many names of the different diseases which are given under the books of pathology in the systemic works of pathology as independent diseases. It is the only time. Before this and after this, he will not take so many names of the diseases. He never takes. But here it was important. Why? Because he wanted us to know that these diseases are given as independent diseases, okay, in the pathological works, but it is basically only a single disease which is showing innumerable forms. It is only SORA which is showing innumerable forms, even in the form of coryza and even in the form of cancer, even in the form of convulsions, even in the form of asthma. In the simpler forms, in the complex forms, it is the same disease which is showing different kinds of symptoms, innumerable forms. If we understand this thing, that okay, I am just curing one disease because there is only one disease process, it becomes too simple because our whole focus goes away from the disease. The whole focus goes away. If we just understand this, that it is a single disease, single disease process, which is going and taking numerous forms. We will stop thinking about remedy based on diseases, because the disease or the concept of disease or so many disease, it basically vanishes from our mind. It becomes more simple. But Dr. Hahnemann has not done this to make it simple. There is a logical reasoning behind it. We'll discuss it in detail. But let's go through the footnote to Aphorism 80. I spent 12 years in investigating the source of this incredibly large number of chronic affections, in ascertaining and collecting certain proofs of this great truth, which had remained unknown to all former or contemporary observers, and in discovering at the same time the principal antisoric remedies, which collectively are nearly a match for this thousand-headed monster of disease in all its different developments and forms. I have published my observations on this subject in the book entitled The Chronic Diseases. Before I had obtained this knowledge, so Dr. Hahnemann is saying that I have spent 12 years in investigation. Like I was telling you that before coming, nowadays, if someone knows something new, the next day they announce that I know this thing, without taking the responsibility whether it is truth, whether it is not, whether it has some corroborative evidence to it, what the experience tells, does the different kind of experiments or this thing show the same thing. So he took 12 years in investigating numerous thousands of patients, thousands of this thing. If we go through this chronic diseases, he has given so many examples of this thing. So he has collected certain proofs. He has observed the things. He has got a large number of data before he came to this thing, before announcing this thing, that it is the only one single which starts in a manner and it basically becomes a thousand-headed monster as he describes it. And he said that I have also found the remedies, the principal antisoric remedies, which he has published in his chronic diseases. the book of chronic diseases. And he has published his observation in the chronic disease. Before I had obtained this knowledge, I could only teach how to treat the whole number of chronic diseases as isolated individual maladies. Very beautifully, that earlier I was thinking of chronic disease as isolated maladies, like we think about it. Okay, this is diabetes, this is hypertension, this is amenorrhea, this is cancer. So you say that I was also doing the same thing with those medicinal substances whose pure effects had been tested on healthy persons up to that period, so that every case of chronic disease was treated by my disciples according to the group of symptoms it presented, just like an idiopathic disease, and it was often so far cured that the sick mankind rejoiced at the extensive remedial treasures already amassed by the new healing art. He's saying that although I was treating it like, taking the symptoms of disease and giving the medicine or whatever the symptoms are being presented at that particular time, by the similia similibus currenter, I was giving the medicine. And even in that way of giving, they were giving good result, like that disease will go, but some other disease will come in its place. But the patients were happy. They were happy that this new healing art is basically curing their symptoms at least. How much greater cause is there now for rejoicing that the desired goal has been so much more nearly attained? Which goal? Aphorism 1. To cure the sick, as it is termed, to health. Inasmuch as the remedy discovered and far more specific homeopathic remedies from chronic infections arising from sora, properly termed antisoric remedies, and the special instructions for their preparation and employment have been published. So you're saying that now it is a more case of rejoice that we are more near to our desired goal of curing the chronic diseases. And from among them, the true physician can now select for his curative agents those whose medicinal symptoms correspond in the most similar manner to the chronic disease he has to cure. And thus, by the employment of antisoric medicines more suitable for this miasm, he is enabled to render more essential service and almost invariably to effect a perfect cure. So he's saying that from all these antisoric medicines, he can now choose a medicine which is more close to the case in front of him and which is invariably there, and it will be more essential for him so that he can cure the patient in the true sense, in the true means, and thus the chronic diseases. He named the book The Chronic Diseases because it is specific for that thing, to understand what the chronic disease is. And to cure a chronic disease without the understanding of miasms, we cannot cure it. A very common thing which we see is whenever the patient comes to us, we give some medicine, the symptoms are relieved and they are relieved for some time. But the patient comes again with the same symptoms after some time or some more aggravated symptoms. We give the same medicine, it sometimes works, it sometimes does not work. So why it worked in the first place and why it doesn't work in the second time or the third time, then we have to change the remedy. It gives relief for some time, then the symptoms come again. This kind of thing which Dr. Hahnemann was seeing in his practice, from there he came to this point that there has to be something which I'm missing, because he knew that homeopathic principle is right. So he said that there is something other thing which is missing, which if I can understand, I can be able to cure the chronic diseases in a more permanent way, in a more healthy way. So from there, this miasms came into existence. From there, this understanding of miasms came. So we'll talk about it in more detail in the next class. We will start with the aphorism 81 in the next class, and then afterwards we will talk about the miasms, because without the understanding of aphorism 81, we cannot go more deeply into the understanding of the miasms.